4, 5 and 6 are recorded by Hansard. Agreed?
Yeah.
Any apologies?
The Deputy Chair may be an apology.
Okay. Draft minutes, pages 5 to 9. Members content they're an accurate record. Agreed? Table request, pages 11 to 14 for noting. Moving on to Barnett Formula and Corporation Tax. Can I seek agreement that in order to inform the further evidence from expert witnesses, the submissions received to date on the review of the Barnett Formula are uploaded to the committee's web pages? Agreed? Can I also advise members arising from last week's evidence session from Dr. Graham Gudgeon? He highlighted the need for political pressure to be exerted to ensure that in calculating the cost of any reduction in the corporation tax rates, the Treasury takes account of potential increases in other taxes such as income tax and VAT resulting from the faster economic growth expected. In its report on the draft budget, the committee also raised concern that there has been no agreement yet from the British Government on this key issue. So on the back of that, could I seek agreement to write to the Minister seeking an assurance on his efforts to see that the issue is addressed with Treasury? Agreed?
Agreed.
Moving on to the first departmental briefing on the budget bill and spring supplementary estimates. The copy of the DFP briefing paper is at pages 16 to 20 of your pack. The budget bill, pages 21 to 70, memorandum 71 to 75, and also in terms of your table packs, there's a letter from the Minister and a paper on DFP's own estimate at pages 3 to 14 of your packs. So can I welcome Emer and Peter to the committee? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you want to make some opening comments on the SSE before we go to questions?
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular occurrence whereby the Executive looked to progress the spring supplementary estimate and the budget bill through the Assembly. The budget bill gives formal authority for expenditure plans set out in the departmental supply estimates for the current financial year. A background paper was provided to the committee last week which set out the overall context. If I can, I would like to draw your attention to a change in the proposed timetable as set out in that document. Subject to approvals, the second stage of the bill will now be taken on the 16th of February rather than the 10th originally indicated. This slight delay still allows for royal assent by the end of the financial year. We're happy to take any questions that you might have on that paper. A critical issue, and probably the main reason we're here today, is the need to seek your agreement to accelerated passage under Standing Order 42 in respect of the budget bill. This can only be given, of course, on the basis that there's been appropriate consultation. Our main purpose here today, therefore, is to assist you with your scrutiny of the spring supplementary estimates and subsequent budget bill. This is not the committee's first engagement on this issue, but a further stage of the consultation process with you that goes back to the start of the year when the main estimates were produced. The main estimates reflected the position in the final year of the Executive's 11-15 budget, and as you will know, there was full consultation on that budget back in 2010. The spring supplementary estimates also includes changes in the subsequent monitoring rounds. Each committee was consulted on departmental monitoring round proposals, and officials gave evidence to this committee on the outcome of each round. We've provided a reconciliation table at Annex A, which explains how the main estimates evolved during the year until we get to final sign-off on the legislative authority approval that we seek today. Again, we're happy to talk you through those changes and provide further detail as necessary. So, as you can see, there has been extensive consultation with the committee on the evolution of the spring supplementary estimates and budget bill. I would now like to draw your attention to some specific issues, if that's okay. The first being the inclusion of headroom in the estimates. Members will be aware that a key executive concern is that as we approach the end of the financial year, no resources are lost from Northern Ireland and surrendered back to Treasury. That would occur if we breached our budget exchange scheme limit. A mechanism to reduce this risk has been built into the estimates, and that is the creation of headroom. That means if significant sums of unanticipated capital reduced requirements emerge in the final few weeks of the financial year, it can be reallocated to departments in Northern Ireland. In addition to the spring supplementary estimates today, we're also seeking the committee's approval for the main estimate for judiciary pensions. And the final issue to flag is the vote on account. This is the approval process to give departments the authority to spend at the start of the 2015-16 financial year. It provides for 45% of what a department needs to get it through until the main estimates approval process, which takes place in June. Chair, those are the key issues I would like to highlight, and we're happy to take further questions.
Thank you very much. Just in terms of Annex A, can you explain how the SSEs link to the monitoring round allocations in terms of especially the main movements of money as summarised through the reconciliation between the main estimates and the SSEs?
Yes, I'll hand you over to Peter.
Yes, Chair. I have all the detail behind those numbers, and I can go through most of it, or all of it, if you like. I'll probably maybe just stick to the sort of transactions over $1 million, if that's helpful, because there's an awful lot here.
That's for something I need to know.
I don't want to bore you completely with it. So, if I start with allocations, and I'll go through each department, just sort of the main ones. For DARD, on the resource side, it's 9.3 million. Most of that is tuberculosis compensation, 8 million, and there's a small depreciation allocation as well, 1.3 million. On the capital side, it was 5.4 million. That was 3.1 for the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise building improvements, and 2.3 million of that was for the Common Agricultural Policy Reform ICT project. For DECAL, there was 4 million resource. They were all very small allocations for things like City of Culture Legacy, cultural programs, and some re-evaluation of assets and things like that. On the capital side, just over 9 million. Again, most of them were all small allocations. City of Culture Legacy again, museums, maintenance, promoting equality, social inclusion, and other minor bits. That was met. For DE, there's 14 million. Most of that is delivering social change, which is allocations from the centre, from the Social Investment Fund and the centre, for literacy programme and nurture units. There was 9 million of that. 5 million was the drawdown of schools' EYF scheme. So you remember that was a scheme that was agreed by the executive in previous years, and executive agreed to honour that. So basically the schools have drawn down 5 million of their schools' EYF stock in this year.
Reading across this, is it any clearer? Because I appreciate that some of these finance officers within departments think it's a black art that they're dealing in, and that no one else should know what they actually did, where stuff is going. Is there any more transparency on the department?
Behind this table?
Well, behind this table, I'm not talking about what we have, but what the Department of Finance are seeing from these departments.
Well, we have, as I say, we have obviously line by line. These numbers are made up of a number of allocations for each department, as I'm reading out now, so that there's line by line. I mean, we have numbers that add up to all these. We can provide that to the committee if that's helpful.
I appreciate, Chair, that where the figures that you get.
Yeah.
But dealing as another committee that we attended yesterday, it was quite evident that the Department of Health, I'll use them as an example because that's what part of that, to get information from them about where the money was being spent, it was like pulling teeth. And in fact, they didn't actually get the answers in the final. And I'm talking about the audit department did not get the answers, so they had to assume that it was right because they weren't able to get the evidence. And I'm just wondering, are we working the same with some of these figures?
Well, departments will record on the database where they spend the money, and there's record lines. So all the money that's spent should be recorded on our database in a record line. We have that. We have record by record line where departments spend their money. Now, if they put it on and spend it somewhere else, then we have a problem, obviously. But that shouldn't happen.
We've actually no problem with them making the spend to the lines that they do make. Yeah, it's under big headings and big numbers.
That's right. Yes, but I mean departments could have a very large amount under a certain heading, and getting behind that heading, we don't have any more information than that.
Well, that's the very point, because some of them actually could be talking about hundreds of millions.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Under a big heading.
And that's where you need to go to the department, and they need to explain to you.
No, they don't want to. They don't want to. Right or wrong?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Whether they have the information themselves, if they keep that specific data.
No, they wouldn't know that. Nobody's allowed to know that.
Well, as far as we're concerned, they should tell you where they spend. Yeah.
They should, yes, but they don't.
Yeah, well.
But the system should actually allow for that, so it is seen.
That's what I'm saying.
And I go back to the financial provision, so we tried to get changed years ago.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the database, there's already thousands of lines. And the more you break it down, you're going to get to millions of lines. You know, it becomes unwieldy and impossible to manage then.
DFP
there's
does work closely with departments,
We do.
particularly the Department of Health. For the coming year, we will be working very closely with that department as to where their allocations are going and how they're
There are
spent.
two big departments, Department of Education and the Department of Health, are two of our biggest departments, two of our biggest spends, and both of them actually hide under a cloak of everything under big blocks, and nobody knows where it's going or anything else. Yes, within their department they know, but they won't make it known to anyone else.
Can I just come in there? And if they had that data broke down, it would save then, when we as MLAs ask freedom of information, it would free, you know, that person, somebody has to be freed up to go and look for that specific detail, which could take a long time over a period of days or weeks to do
No,
so.
you get back a line, it's uneconomical to give this
Yeah.
answer, you know.
But if the data was there, if that was broken down, it would simplify things for us when we're looking for information.
Well, for example, obviously for health and education, they will allocate a lot of money out to the health trust and education health board or the education board, library boards. Again, so they need, probably the department will need to go to them to get a handle on where they spend it, to be honest. Okay. Should I continue with the...
Could you just maybe, Chair, before you leave education,
Yeah.
it's interesting that with the movements during the year,
Yeah.
that the final outturn would appear to be pretty well as the original budget figure initially. Is that just coincidence?
It is, yeah. It is just coincidence. Yeah. I mean, you can probably look, you can pick any year and departments, and some departments will get more allocations or whatever during the year. But this shows the movement from obviously the starting budget to the end point after the 3 monitoring rounds. And it was, for some departments, the transactions will even out, so you nearly end up in the same position as you started with.
So that 14 million allocation from resource, that's solely from the social investment fund, is it?
No, there was a little bit else. There was, let me see, no, 9 million, that was from the social investment fund for delivering social change, literacy and nurture units, and 5 million was the EYF scheme, drawdown of money from the EYF scheme.
EYF?
Yeah, that's the school's EYF scheme.
Oh, yeah.
This is schools basically drawing down and spending 5 million of their build-up reserves.
Thank you.
I think I got to Dale, I think it is.
Dale, you're starting, yeah.
They're all very small, so they're mainly, again, delivering a social change, building a united community. For Daddy, 24 million of resource. Most of that was for Invest in I. It was 19.4 million for Invest in I. A small deliver and social change allocation, 1.1 million. Tourist board, 1.2 million, and funding for promoting major sporting events, 3.2 million. And then on the capital side, 4.4 million to Invest in I, and 5 million for selective financial assistance. Okay, so that made up most of that 9.7 million there. For EFP, 5.8 million on the resource side. That was for the asset management strategy, 3.6 million. And 2.3 million, that was a bid for depreciation pressures, 2.3 million.
Sorry, just on that one again, Peter. Why should you have a problem with depreciation
That's
3/4 of the way through the year or whatever?
that. It could be an accountancy change or revaluation of assets or something like that.
But the depreciation law hasn't changed, has it, or has it?
No, well, it could be. Say an asset has appreciated, the depreciation you need to hold might increase as well. So it's just a.
That's an Amy thing, isn't it?
Some of it is in Amy, some of it is in ring fence. Depends on.
It's just got.
I know it's the council rules. If it's something that's under your control, for example, so if you don't maintain a building, for example, and the asset reduces in value, okay, then they might appreciate lower. But if you maintain a building and bring it up to a higher standard, the value of that building will increase, and the depreciation charge will increase. But that's something you did to the asset, so it scores in the ring fence Dale. But if the value changes because of, say, market conditions, so say the property market just reduced and the property then value reduce accordingly,
But if we just take
an external factor, then it's Amy.
Okay, I don't want to labour the point. But if you had a tight budget and you were managing the department, so what you would do is you would save money on maintenance, and you would save money then on depreciation.
Well, if you say, no,
Surely that's crazy.
no, actually, no, it's the other way around. If you save money on maintenance and don't maintain the asset,
Yeah.
yeah, it could
Depreciation
drop in
should-
value. It could drop in, yeah, potentially.
It goes down twice
Potentially,
then.
yeah. But, you know, the depreciation budget is ring-fenced, non-cash, so it doesn't free up any money for you to spend anywhere else. You know,
No, but it does reduce your AME
it
depreciation.
reduces your pressure, but it doesn't free up money you can use for anything else. It doesn't give you extra spending power to do anything else.
Actually,
There's a certain reverse logic in it, I must say, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
DHSS, I think I got two. Resource side, 83.4 million.
80 million of that was the allocation in the monitoring rounds for various health pressures. And there's a little bit of delivering social change, 2.4 million from the centre.
can I just before moving off that, and I'm trying to look forward to what's actually happening on our 15-16. See the 83 million you're talking about, which was to deal with pressures.
Yeah.
Is that included as part of their natural budget estimate for next year?
No, that's a separate issue. That budget was set as part of the 15-16
Yeah.
budget,
Yeah.
so that's a completely separate issue.
But I've always have a fear that whenever you give money into a department, they end up creating a tier of expenditure associated with that money that they don't get rid of, and as a consequence, then it becomes part of their bid for money for the following year.
That might be in some circumstances, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, the budget was set separately through the 15-16 budget process.
I always think that estimates are targets that they have to make sure that they spend.
Yeah.
Peter, just in terms of the 83, what percentage of that or what proportion of that was for frontline pressures?
My understanding was there was all frontline pressures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't have a definition for frontline.
No, well, that's a
Could be any
different
more
question.
specific in terms of a breakdown of that? Or is it-
Yeah.
It wasn't for service developments, which
No.
is maybe what
Yeah.
you were talking about. It was to address the pressures that were emerging in the system because of demand
Yeah.
and volume increases.
Yeah. So the allocations and the different monitoring rounds was frontline pressure on each occasion, and there was no other included in that.
No.
Okay, on the capital side for health, there was, well, most of that, 7.5 was for medical equipment, ICT, health and safety improvements.
Medical equipment that they actually use then?
Sorry?
Medical equipment that they actually use, they're not just spending the money?
No,
I'm sure they will use it once they
Not commissioned?
I don't know.
Appreciate that.
20 million.
DOE, that was 16.6 million on the resource side. Most of that was local government reform,
12.8 million. This is a previous executive.
commitment, and small amounts, some of them for de-rating grant and some carrier bag levy, shortfall of 0.3 million there.
Can I ask where that underspend of 20,200,000 came from
the
on
Health.
health.
20 million of an easement.
Which one is that? Sorry,
easement? health?
easements.
Capital.
I'll get on
To
to
the easements, if that's okay, after.
That's all right.
I'll
You're
run
leaving
through
them?
them, yeah. You're messing up my order.
That's part of our tactic.
I'll get to easements, I promise you. Okay, on the capital side, DOE, there was local government reform, planning portal enhancement, 2 million, and household recycling measures, 1.5 million. DOJ, then resource side, 30 million. There's 19 million that was for legal aid, 10 million for PSNI, and there were some other very minor allocations. BRD, the 15 million resource, most of that was concessionary fares, 9.5 million. And some other, just over 5 million for roads, maintenance and street lighting repairs. On the capital side, just over 48 million. 30 million of that was for road structural maintenance, Then there was an allocation of 4.2 million for the Belfast Transport Hub development. Coastal Defence Works, 3.1 million. Local Transport Safety, 3 million. Water Treatment Works, 2 million. Bus and Rail Infrastructure, 1 million. Active Schools Travel Programme, 1 million. And Street Lighting Renewal, 3 million. I think that made up that 48. DSD, there was a 3.8 million resource allocation, which was delivering social change, all of that. And then 54.5 million capital. 23.5 of that was for the co-ownership scheme. 13.5 was for urban regeneration. 7 million social housing. 4 million the Green New Deal boiler replacement scheme,
Which was held at the centre and then allocated to the DSD in June monitoring.
and I think there was 6 million of Together Building a United Community.
That was the extra borrowing powers we got from Treasury. That was given to them in June monitoring.
I'll skip the minors and just move on. I'll just take over from DFM. There was 18.9 million on the resource side. Again, lots of small allocations, but one was the childcare fund, 1.5 million. Delivering social change, 3.2. Another one there was historical institutional abuse inquiry, 4.3 million. And then victims and survivor service, 2.6 million. And as I said, some very minor ones too. On the capital side, most of the 50 million was for the University of Ulster financial transactions capital allocation, 48.5 million. Now the bid was being made by Dale, but because they don't have the legal barriers to make a loan, it goes up through SIB, so that's why it's shown up in OFM DFM there. I will move on to easements now.
Just in terms of the easements, as an overall question, Peter, I mean,
Yeah.
the capital side tallies up to 330 million
Yeah.
easements, and then you've capital allocations of 226. I'm just thinking back, I mean, is that significant in comparison to other years, and is that a good thing or a
It
bad
is,
thing?
and there's a reason why there's a difference as well. Actually, I'll maybe explain that first up. If you remember back to October 2013, the executive did a capital reallocation exercise because we knew the A5 wasn't going to go ahead in 14-15. But to plan properly for using that extra capital to come back in this year, the executive made allocations to allocate out 150 million worth of capital spend as planned for the A5 in this year. So DID essentially gave up the 150 million back in 2013, but it was already allocated out then. But the actual physical handover, the money was only happening in June this year, so that 115 of that total is actually A5 money that came back, had already been allocated out, so it wasn't available for allocation this year. Sounds a bit complicated, but that's the way it worked basically. And on top of that, there was a small 7.8 million declared by DART in respect to the HQ relocation project as well, which was taken back in 2013. Again, it was allocated out back then for this year, so the money came in and wasn't available. So 122 million of the total you see at the bottom, the total of easements there, wasn't available for allocation in this year.
Sorry, but is that 7 million from DART not being spent?
No, not on the relocation project. It was reallocated for something else.
I have a recollection of a question assuring me that 7.1 was spent.
Well, they might have spent. I can't remember what they had in the budget for 14 for that particular project. They might have had more than the 7.8. They might have, or they can only spend a small amount. Okay. They might not have given up all of it.
Doesn't get any easier, does it?
No, it doesn't. So it's just to explain the difference between the amount of easements that came back and what was actually allocated out. So that there's a difference of well over 100 million there.
What's the economic impact of that? I mean, you're saying like 150 million for a large scale projects, capital projects, and they're all being spent in year on smaller projects. Is there an analysis of
Well, see, that's why
better for the economy or worse?
That's why the executive took a decision to allocate out in 2013, so we could allocate to things like the Children's Hospital, and there was a number of other road schemes actually, which BID took forward. I think it was the
I think I have a few of them here actually. The A26, I think it was one of them. Let's see. Yeah, A26, they allocated towards the A31 Magherafelt bypass, the new children's hospital, the A8
Road scheme as well. So those were all allocations made back in 2013 to take forward those schemes in this year. So there was an attempt to at least try and bring forward some proper schemes as opposed to short-term measures. Okay.
If I just quickly run through then the easements then, so I already covered most of Dart's capital there. 8.9 of that was against the headquarter relocation project, of which 7.8 wasn't actually available because it was already allocated out. Decal, that was all the regional stadia, the 63 million there, and most of that was to do with the Casement Park because of the digital review. A little bit was slippage in Windsor Park. DE, the 1 million was just a City of Culture Legacy movement actually to Decal. On the capital side, most of that was 2.3 million was surplus assets receipts, and 5.6 million was TBUC. Remember the additional RI borrowing they got? Well, they could only spend a little bit of that, so they gave 5.6 back. And we are talking to Treasury about reprofiling that for future years now. Dale, 10.9 million. Most of that was Further Education Colleges EYF scheme. So the FE colleges have a similar EYF scheme as the school sector, but in this instance, they actually decided to increase the reserves by 8.3 million as opposed to drawing down. Probably looking at next year and the year after when things are getting tighter. Daddy, there was 16.9 million capital coming back. Most of that was the gas extension project to the west, 9.5 million. And there was 5 million for the agri-food loan scheme, which is FTC, came back. And a little bit from NI, the Northern Tourist Board, 1.5 million. Some small easements on the resource side for Daddy, mainly depreciation and impairments.
The gas extension, where's that at now?
I am not sure exactly where the scheme is.
That put back a year or further down?
I presume it's certainly delayed for a while, or whether it's actually started and it's just the profile is shifted slightly. I'm not quite sure. We may come back to you on
Yes.
that. If you like.
Yep.
Okay, DFP, most of that was actually increased income from land registers and NISRA, 1 million. And then there was a small reduction in staff costs. For DHSS, 20 million capital. There was 10 million from the Children's Hospital, 2.6 from the Fire Service. 5 million of that was the FTC scheme for doctors and dentists, which isn't going to go ahead this year. And there was a small 1.2 million from the Causeway Hospital wind turbine project. BOE, 2.8 million capital was 0.7 million from the Explorers, 2 million from DVA, delay in driver replacement system project. And on the resource side, that was an easement in local government, ICT. DOJ, there was an easement, 4 million resource side, which is depreciation easement. On the capital side, it was mainly the Northern Ireland Community Safety College at Des Creek, 14 million, and then 17 from the prison service. DRD, there's 28.6 million reduction. Nearly all of that, 28.2 million, was roads depreciation reductions. 158 million on the capital side. As I explained earlier on, most of that was the A5 road, 119.5 million, of which 115 was declared in 2013, which wasn't available for allocation then, because it had already been allocated out. There was 17.8 million from the A2 Green Island Road, 3 million from the A26 road, 5.1 from A31 Magherafelt bypass, And there was some additional EU income, which then came back for reallocation. Or actually, the income freed up commercial capital there, which then could be surrendered back. DSD, there was easements on the resource side from 25 million. 12 million of that was the Social Security Agency due to the delay in welfare reform. There was 5 million for housing benefit and 3.5 million housing benefit rates, and some depreciation repairments as well, about 2.3 million. Capital side, 9.7 million. There was 4 million for the Housing Association grant payments, 3.5 million for additional income for the North Island Co-ownership Housing Association, and an easement of 2 million in respect of the social fund crisis loans. I'll go to OFM DFM. There was on the capital side 9.7 million. Easement of 1.2 million for the Common Road Jail, Eppington 1.7 million, Maidstone Cash 5.5 million, Social Investment Fund 1.2 million. It's made up most of that 9.7, and that was the easements. Any questions before I move on to tech? I might have a drink of water. Go on to the technicals. I maybe don't propose to go through all the technicals, maybe just explain the type of technical transfers there are and then pick out a few of the main ones. In terms of technicals, the technical transfers between departments is always net to zero, so it's just a department deciding to transfer, say, 2 million to another department. It's a minus in one department, a plus in another, and then net to zero. And both departments always have to agree those transfers, so it'll show up here in the technicals as, if it's a movement from say DART, say $1 million, it's a minus $1 million for DART, and then if it's a movement to DADI, it's a plus $1 million for DADI. Okay, so that's how it'll show up in the technicals. Then there are transfers from outside of Northern Ireland, so it could be a government department in the UK, a Whitehall department that might transfer funding to one of our departments. That'll just show up as a plus in our department. Okay, so it's actually a net gain to us. And there's another type of transfer, which is when we access the Treasury Reserve. Again, it's a net gain to the department that accesses that fund. And then there's a slight technicality in here in that the Social Investment Fund, some of the funding that went, for example, to DSD and OFM DFM was then moved from OFM DFM or DSD to, say, DE to live or somewhere because they're doing it joint. So the movement from, say, DSD or from DFM to DE would show up in the technicals here because it's essentially a transfer of funding from one to the other. And then the final category in here is headroom. We include the headroom in the technicals. Okay, so within it's DRD and DSD, the headroom is included in the technicals in here. So I'll maybe pick a few of the main ones here. One of them for Dale, they had on the resource side 51.7 million. The main element there is the student reserve claim. We always claim from the Treasury because there's always a shortfall in our non-cash costs for student loans. When student loans are impaired, it was based on a model back in 2010, which was, strictly speaking, not correct. It didn't calculate it correct, but it's a problem across the UK. So it's a problem for Scotland, Wales, and the BIS in Whitehall. So all of us go to Treasury for a reserve claim every year, and we always get it because they recognise there was a problem with the model. Okay, so 53.7 of that is that reserve claim that came into Dale. And there's 5.2 million in respect of EMA savings. So that's, again, also to do with the tuition fees when they were set. Most of that pressure was covered by cuts to departments. But the executive agreed there would be some of that would be covered from savings to the EMA budget, education information allowances. So Dale was to do some work to try and reduce that, the cost associated with that, and that would then cover the pressure that sat in the centre. So 5.2 million was transferred from Dale, savings that made into the centre to cover a pressure that was sitting at the centre. DADI, there was 4.7 million on the capital side in technical transfers. Most of that was actually more, 4.9 million was
a transfer from, I think it was Department of, I mean, one of the Whitehall departments anyway, into the Super Connected Cities. It's a UK-wide broadband scheme. So Daddy got funding through that.
Strabane never got anyone.
On DFP, there wasn't really anything other than technical transfers. DHSS was just technical transfers and a few an allocation through childcare strategy, so transfer from another department. DOE, not much there. DOJ, the 28.4 million there on the resource side. 31.5 of that was the reserve claim. As you remember, that was the financial package when we got the evolution of justice and policing. And we could access the Treasury Reserve for security funding pressures and EYF we had built up in previous years. So 31.5 of that was us accessing that reserve. And the same on the capital side, 10.2 million was drawn down in respect of that EYF scheme, security pressures. On the DRD side, 5.5 million capital there, 3 million of that was headroom, as we talked about earlier on. And DSD, not really much there other than technical transfers. And then on the capital side, 13.2 million, 12 million of that was the DSD headroom that Emer already mentioned. And I think that's about all the main ones I would like to highlight. Hopefully that answers your question, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. In terms of paragraph 16 of your paper, you state that the committee has a vital role in ensuring accelerated passage of the bill. Can you outline the steps taken to ensure there's been appropriate consultation as is required under Standing Order 42.2 and upon which the committee will decide on whether to grant accelerated passage to the bill?
Yeah, as Emer alluded to in the open statement already, obviously there was consultation on the budget was set back in 2010, which set the main estimates in the summer, what the main estimates are based on. Full consultation on our budget. There was consultation on any changes between the 10 budget and now, for example, the capital relocation exercise we've been funding this committee, explaining all the changes then. Then through obviously all the monitoring rounds, there's been consultation with the committees as departments would put their bids and easements in. They would consult with their own committees on that prior to actually submitting their bids and easements, so consultation in that respect. And then officials from the departments been fund of view this committee on the outcome of all the monitoring rounds throughout the year. So I think there has been full consultation in that respect.
And just to come back to the headroom again, how confident are you that the monies will be spent and not returned to Treasury?
Well, with the 12 million headroom billing, we are very confident we'll not breach the capital side. But as I say, it's always, on the capital side, you always worry that, as I said before, I think that a large project might be delayed over the last few months of the year. It's always harder to spend capital, but what we've done talking to both DRD and DSD, they're confident they can spend capital up till the end of the year. So that gives us a mechanism at least to avoid having hand any capital back to Treasury.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the budget exchange scheme limits, are you confident that those will be adhered to as well?
Absolutely, that's the whole idea that we'll stick with. I think on the capital side, it's only about 14 million we can carry forward, so it is quite tight, and that gives us that headroom, gives us the ability to spend a little bit more towards the year end if we think there's easement somewhere in other departments.
Just follow on, Chair. Are you saying that the resource then on the budget, the year-end budget exchange scheme is okay? There'll be no resource money sent back?
That's absolutely that's the plan, yeah.
And the same with financial transactions capital?
Yes, that's all allocated out now. The financial transactions, there's nothing sitting at the centre.
All A-OK.
It's all going out to University of Ulster.
Write that down.
In terms of the judicial pension scheme, then, which is at page 18 of the PAGs, could that not have been simply covered in the vote on account for 15-16? And then what additional resources would be required for the scheme during the next financial year?
Well, we need a main estimate. It can't be covered by the voting account because the body, it's just coming into fruition on the 1st of April. Okay. So it needs its own estimate to give the authority to spend. Really, the scheme it's coming from the primary legislation that brought the wider reforms of pension schemes into Northern Ireland because secondary legislation is now going through, and this is really just the mechanism that will allow the body, the pensions funds to be released from the 1st of
So
April.
will it differ much from other public sector schemes?
No, this is the reform that will bring it into line.
Similar? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Any other members? Martin?
I wonder, could you bring us back through the DL and the impairment and student loans and so on again, just a bit slower?
Okay.
So just
Yeah.
to tell us about this 2010 impairment, and everybody being very understanding and so on.
Okay.
Please.
The student loan impairments were calculated based on a model called the HERO model, which was it's a statistical model that takes into account things like forecasts for economic growth, so on, and incomes, because students only start to pay back their loans when they hit a certain threshold. The model, and forgive me if I don't sort of completely into the detail of the model, but it maybe not miscalculated, but there was elements of that maybe it didn't take into account, which they've now corrected with a new model. But when the budgets were set back in 2010, there was a recognition that the model had perhaps understated the amount of impairment cover that was needed by Dale here in Northern Ireland and Scotland, Wales and England. And Treasury recognised that. So because there's then a shortfall in your budget, because we get the budget for student impairments separate, and it's ring fenced by Treasury, it can only be used for that. They give us the separate budget for that. Because that was understated back in 2010, we have gone to Treasury every year since, basically, to access the reserve to get that extra budget cover. Now, Treasury probably fairly relaxed because it's actually non-cash cover. There's no cash implication. It's just giving us the budget cover to impair the loans to the right amount.
So just last question. So I understand what that is now. So these are loans which have been defaulted. Is that what they are?
These are loans that we then now project will be defaulted or not paid back due to various reasons.
What percentage are we predicting won't be?
Oh, I don't know the
5,
I don't
10?
know the detail. No, I think it's higher than that.
Okay. Is it 80?
I don't know. It's not 80. I know it's not 80, but I don't know. I don't know the detail, to be honest. I think probably would have to ask Dale that. They have much more detail on that.
I'll knock that door. I've had much success at that door, but I'll knock that door too. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, have enough? Emer, Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, can I advise you that the committee's decision on accelerated passage needs to be conveyed to the Speaker by the 16th of February, which is the date scheduled for the second stage. So if members are content, I'll put the question that the Committee for Finance and Personnel is satisfied that there has been appropriate consultation with it on the public expenditure proposals contained in the Budget Bill NI 2015 and is content to grant accelerated passage to the bill in accordance with Standing Order 42.2. Agreed?
Great.
If members, let's see, the draft letter is at page 15. Okay, so that will be sent to the Speaker. And can I also seek agreement DFP briefing paper at pages 16 to 20 is copied to relevant committees for information? Agreed? Moving on then to public procurement. DFP briefing paper is at pages 77 to 84 and the Secretariat preparation sheet pages 18 to 21. Welcome to the meeting, Des Armstrong, Director of Central Procurement Directorate, and Gareth Johnson in Policy and Performance Division within CPD. If that's okay, gentlemen, can we go straight into questions, or is there some comments you want to make at the start?
No, we provided a paper for attendance. Just like to thank you for the opportunity to come along and talk to you. We're happy to take it.
Okay, go straight to questions. It's just in terms of social clauses, it's something that the committee's looked at on a number of occasions. And while there's reference made in the briefing paper to social clauses providing for apprenticeships and for work placements for the unemployed students and trainees, what other types of social or community benefit could potentially be derived from public contracts?
Well, we have looked at we've had a focus obviously through the programme for government on the issue of social clauses, and previous briefings with the committee have pointed out that we have a number of clauses that are standard to all contracts, and these usually relate to equality, health and safety, and we're doing some work with in terms of how we reference human rights. So those would be standard clauses. There then is opportunity to link social clauses and community benefit to the subject matter of a contract, and that's where it gives a department the opportunity to look at what role a department might have, and therefore shape up a community benefit or a social clause specifically related to their function. We've produced some guidance for departments that gives them a bit of a list of things that they can look at when they start to consider the types of community benefits or social clauses that they want to put into their contract, looking at the role of the department, their legal obligations and what have you. But in terms of specifics, the sorts of things that we think you can bring forward, obviously there's the training opportunities, bringing apprentices through, but we also looked at how the impact of the contract would produce benefits to communities by financial benefit, for example, in terms of not accepting tenders that are abnormally low, making sure that there's a fair payment practice, that ethos right through the contract, and that would spread out through, through the organisations out into the community. So there are a number of things that we've been able to address in terms of community benefits, but the focus, obviously, that we've had here today has been around social clauses, and that's where that report goes to.
Mm-hmm. And what type of social clauses work best from your experience?
Well, I think I could just outline that a point that in terms of Northern Ireland, the requirement is to include social clauses in all contracts. We've been looking very closely at what's happening across in other jurisdictions, and we're now seeing that the outworkings of legislation coming through in other jurisdictions are starting to place a requirement for social clauses in contracts at a higher financial level than what we have in Northern Ireland. And that presents an issue then as to at what value contract is it reasonable or effective to put in social clauses that are different from those standard good clauses that I mentioned at the start. In Scotland, for example, we're seeing the Reform of Procurement Bill coming through with a requirement at £4 million, projects above £4 million to be considered for this. And in the Social Value Act that's through in England and Wales, that's looking at purely at service contracts above the EU threshold, which is around £100,000, £110,000. We have struggled to get effective social benefit clauses into contracts that are of low value or of short duration. They've been most effective, I think, in construction, and particularly where an organisation might have a long programme of work ahead of it. For example, in the maintenance and development of the government estate, where a framework is in place, that gives us an opportunity to, work with the contractor to bring forward opportunities for employment and to encourage apprenticeship take-up, that type of thing. So I think there is an issue around the size of the contract and the benefit that we can put into it. It can be limited by just virtue of value and duration.
Adrian?
Thanks. Just there's on the social clauses as well, and you sort of touched on it there. I was wanting to know what you could add to make sure that the apprentices would be covered in that there. For that's something that the construction industry always is throwing back and saying there are no apprentices coming through, and I think the place to address that is at the signing of the contracts.
Yeah, we did agree with the industry, probably when the industry is a bit more buoyant than what it is in Northern Ireland now, a specific linkage between the number of apprentices that would be brought forward and the contract values, and that worked well, I think, when the industry was buoyant. Obviously, the industry has been in a reasonably steady decline. We've been speaking to the industry again about going back to a situation where the clauses that we put in contracts are more related to employment rather than training opportunities as such. And as part of that discussion, we want to talk to them about apprenticeship. But lots of the main contractors now in Northern Ireland are actually working across in England and in Scotland and Wales. So while we might be able to ask them to take on apprenticeships. Those apprentices might have to be working outside Northern Ireland. So there are issues around that makes the thing a bit more complicated than trying to, if you like, create these opportunities that are going to be effective in Northern Ireland.
And is there anything you can see that would make it any easier? Anything that you can see that you could do at your end to make it any easier?
Well, one of the issues around, again, comes back to the duration and size of some of the projects that we have in Northern Ireland. Where we have a continuing programme of work, I think that's where we should target the opportunities to maximise the benefits that we can from training opportunities. So if you have a social housing programme that is X number of units per year, then we should be looking at see how we can work with housing associations to see if that opportunity can be brought forward, or if we're developing the education estate over a period, or the government estate. Those are the sort of areas that we certainly must look at and make sure that we've squeezed the benefit that we can out of those. We're trying to sort of encourage CITB have a scheme, a pilot scheme up around a shared apprenticeships, and we're certainly very keen to see how that works out. That means where an apprentice is taken on and is brought around and given work across a number of contractors. Because obviously, if you're going to apprentice bricklayer or joiner or whatever, you need continuity of work, and that, in more buoyant days, contractors would have had an order book that would allow them to move them from one job to the next. But obviously, that doesn't appear to be there at the minute. But we are in discussion with the Construction Employers Federation and through other representatives at SIFNI to see how we can maximise again the benefit that we can get from it.
Chair, I don't know if you touched this or not, but here the programme for government set and it's passed on down to individual departments to ensure that it's in the business case. How can the executive be sure that each department is doing that there, and is it a matter for you whenever a business case is presented to you, is it to ensure that them social clauses are all ticked, the boxes are all ticked for that?
Yeah, I mean, if I go back again to the executive's definition of best value for money, it indicates that it's a combination of cost, quality and sustainability. And the sustainability has to be indicated or considered in the business case and linked to the programme of government. So the executive's direction there is in place. We have provided guidance in CPD as to how social considerations can be brought forward into contracts. The procurement board has agreed that departments should set targets for what they will achieve through their procurement spend. And more recently, we've been in discussion with financial colleagues in DFP to produce a guidance note again, or letter to the finance directors, indicating to them that how they should address social considerations and sustainability at business case level.
Do you see any resistance at departmental level, of that, or?
Well, resistance, I'm not sure if it's resistance or a difficulty with, as I mentioned, with just the way the programmes are shaped up. I think if you talk to folk about, creating benefit through contracts for Northern Ireland and growing the economy and helping folk along, everybody's on board for it. There are difficulties that present themselves when you start to move into the application of some of those policies. And I think that's where we've been trying to use a system where simplify the requirement, make sure that we can measure it, and then build that as a case study, to encourage others to do that. I think we've got some good examples in the construction area, where we've been able to bring those things through.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Just as you made reference to business case stage of this, something which the previous committee inquiry on procurement had identified as being vitally important. Can DFP apply any leverage at that stage in terms of whether to approve departmental business cases involving procurement projects?
The letter that's gone to finance directors is that when the department has to refer a business case to DFP for approval, that as part of the approval process, there will be a consideration of how sustainability has been considered as part of best value for money. And they have produced a list of types of things that should be looked at in the business case across social, economic and environmental. So there is, again, some guidance to finance directors who, I suppose, ultimately are responsible for ensuring that the business case process within departments is effective and proportionate and does test the concept of best value for money.
It is just a stage of the procurement process that really we want to focus on more. There's been a lot of work done in policy development in the procurement stage, from you put out a tender to you let a contract. But the stage before that, the commissioning stage, is something that we've seen in other jurisdictions is getting much more attention. And that's the stage where if we can work a bit more with departments to encourage people to think about things like social clauses. But also to think about what it is that as a whole they want to get out of the procurement. We're trying to encourage people to move away from like-for-like procurement, from going with the same thing that you bought 5 years ago, because the world might have moved on, technology might have moved on. We're looking at how we can encourage more market engagement at that stage, and that was a big message that came out of an innovation lab just before Christmas. So in the same way, if we can build the support that is available for people in departments there who are involved in commissioning, the guidance, the advice, the training that's available, I think that will have benefits for the identification of social clauses as well.
Yeah, I think that, I might touch on this with when we talk about the new directives and new regulations that are coming through. We did a fair bit of work with CIB in terms of some of the issues that they felt their members had with the procurement process. And we developed a model that broke the procurement process, we call that, down into three stages. One is the commissioning stage. You then have this regulated bit in the middle, which is the process that you have to go through to comply with European legislation to award a contract. Then you have the contract delivery stage. We've had a fair bit of focus on the middle bit in terms of our interaction with departments and with the COPs as to how we actually make sure that we're, I suppose, compliant with that type of regulation. I think that the new regulations and some of the reviews that we're doing alongside that gives us the opportunity now to look at the other two stages a bit more and to try and, I suppose, focus our guidance and encouragement and reassurance, if you need it, to commissioners as to how they actually might take that. And what we will do, for example, in that is to get some local examples that we can broadcast around the system that says, look, this is what works. And, things on the Peace Bridge and what have you are good now, solid examples that we can explain. And when we get to the contracting bit, we want contractors to understand that these are obligations that must be delivered just in the same way as any other of the more harder bits of the contract have to be delivered. So I suppose our strategy going forward will be to try and settle that we've done what we need to do in the middle bit, but to look at the commissioning bit and to look at what actually has been delivered through contracts. Now, I think that we've got a start on that, a good start now on how social clauses can be delivered and the types of things. What we need to do is encourage departments to come up with their ideas. If we sit in the centre, we can't anticipate or understand all of the complexities and requirements that a government has scattered across its departments. But we want to try and focus now on trying to free up some of the stuff that we think you could put alongside contracts. Some examples would be in health, for example. Health projects are now within the CPD. We want to look at how do we improve the health of workforce that's actually building, the installations, as well as training opportunities, employment opportunities. Can we do something that actually, when young men go to building sites, that we look at how their health is, give them some health advice? That's the type of thing I think that.
Can you just expand on that a bit more? I mean, what do you mean in terms of?
Well, I mean, it's a concept that we need to think about. It's when you're building involved in construction, how do we improve how do we better things for those folk who are involved in the construction process? And those folk are usually in the community because that's the way the construction works. So those are the types of things. But I mean, if we can encourage departments to come up through innovation, think about things not on the basis of like-for-like procurement, but think of things that are directly related to what their department has to deliver, and then see if we can put that through on their procurement spend. That's the sort of stuff we're going to talk about.
But just in that aspect about health, I mean, could you elaborate more on what? you're thinking about?
Well, one example there is that there has been a programme in terms of children who have come up through the care system, children and young people who have come up through the care system, of looking at where there are hospital projects ongoing, healthcare projects ongoing, there could be work experience or employment opportunities for them, and there's been some work started on that, and I know there's further consideration being given to it. So really what we're trying to encourage departments to do is to say, okay, you have got an aim as a department. Now, what creative ways might there be of furthering that aim through the process of public procurement?
Adrian, you do?
Just a wee quick one there, Gareth. You said encourage. You said it 2 or 3 times. You know, what happens if encourage doesn't work? You know, is there a stick there as well, or?
I don't think we have a stick. I think that our role is to produce guidance and make sure that the guidance is fit for purpose and is properly consulted about as we put that in place. We have a role then, and certainly in CPD, when we provide a service through our 2 COPs, you know, to make sure that the guidance that we've suggested should be put in place is actually followed. So we will be encouraging through the activity of our COPs, and that's one of the things that we're very keen in making sure that we discuss as a senior management team in CPD is the performance on social clauses going into contracts and what's being organised on that. We will have, with the new e-tendering system, direct access to management information in terms of contracts going through without these social clauses being put in place. I think that gives a bit more leverage. But I think in terms of sanction, there's no sanction.
No. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Michaela?
Thank you, Chair. These are very welcome. I have a couple of questions. Just in terms of the Strategic Investment Board review, what further detail is available on that, and what areas, specific areas, will they be focusing in on? And why will the review only focus on the potential for larger contracts, and what's the definition, how is that defined?
Well, the terms of reference or with SIB, the SIB, it's an SIB review. We discussed it at the last procurement board. We give a feedback on terms of where we are on social clauses. Pointed out the limitation that CPD has in terms of its role. Our role is to produce the guidance and then monitor. It doesn't give us a role to suggest that the outcome is not the outcome that it should be, because that runs back again to the policy owner. I think that we want a clear understanding of what's the best way to take the thing forward. I think we realise that we're going to be involved in procurement for as long as there's government procurement to be done. So we have an opportunity just to refresh how we take this forward. And I think a key decision in this is this better targeted to contracts at a certain size, which will be a smaller number, which will be easier to monitor in terms of outputs, rather than a blanket requirement which someone could write off and say, well, it doesn't work for my contract because it's too small and short duration. The terms of reference, I assume we could share. I think the SIB.
Can the committee get a copy of the terms?
I think there's a briefing paper which the SIB are preparing, so I can certainly suggest to them they might want to share that with the committee. But really it is around just assessing the progress in the use of social clauses and what should be put in place in the future to make them the more impactful. SIB have got Richard McFarlane involved in this, who has done a lot of work nationally, internationally, on the use of social clauses, particularly in encouraging employment and taking people off the long-term unemployed register and getting them into jobs. So there is a fair amount of wider expertise which is going into the review that's very helpful. And I know they're just going into a stakeholder engagement phase, so I think there'll be an opportunity for a variety of interests.
Who will be involved in that? Who will have an input around that?
Well, it's being led by the SIB as an independent review, so the SIB staff are involved. But in terms of stakeholders, I know they're obviously talking to people across the procurement community in the centres of procurement expertise. They've been talking to us in CPD as well. But I think very keen to engage with a wider range of interests, and I've heard just in the last week or two of a couple of third sector interests who were going to be making sure that they were making their views known to the SIB. I mean, that's been one side of the SIB's work. The other side was a very major launch last week of a toolkit around social clauses. It was launched in the Titanic with a range of interests right across public, private, voluntary sectors. Richard McFarlane was involved in the launch and in the preparation of the toolkit as well. And that's now available as a resource for commissioners, which will be, it's an online toolkit, so it'll be added to in the years to come.
What is it, a stage-by-stage process, or what is the timeline for the review, the timeframe for it?
As I understand it, I mean, I would emphasise it's an SIB review, but as I understand it, they're planning to engage really over the next couple of months with a view to finalising things certainly before the summer. So it's not an elongated timescale.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, John?
Thanks, Chair. Mainly just coming back, I suppose one of the problems is around the data, and maybe you've identified even, you know, the accuracy and completeness of the figures are very, very low. How would you see addressing that? I know that you're hoping that the SIB review isn't going to be a long drawn-out process, but is there anything in the interim that you would suggest doing to try and improve that?
In terms of the requirements getting into contracts, well,
yeah.
the new e-tenders system that we have in place will require, as contracts are brought through on that system, will be information gathered as to which contracts are including social clauses and others. Yeah.
But I mean, round you've had some, even monitoring the returns in from some departments, you've identified.
There are issues that some departments have not given us the information.
Yeah, I mean, any ideas as to how you would address that? Even the Department of Education have not provided you with any information. Have they given any reason?
Have they given any reason? No, I don't suppose. I think that they just were not prepared to make a return. You know, right?
But I think at this stage we're pretty keen to see what comes out of the SIB review. I mean, there is a lot of work and effort goes into the reporting, particularly on the construction side, because there within CPD we have got visibility of the contract management stage as well as the procurement stage. I mean, for those contracts in the construction sector that CPD's dealing with, I could give you the figures broken down all sorts of ways. So that's been fairly thorough. But I think what we want to do is to wait and see what is coming out of the SIB review, and that will allow us to construct the monitoring arrangements accordingly. As Des says, alongside the new e-tender system, we are developing a business information module, which will give us a means of collecting this in and assimilating it much more easily. But I'd be keen just to see what comes out of SIB so that we target it properly.
But if a department doesn't cooperate, will that not, will that not make it more problematic? You meeting PFG targets on some of this that you don't actually have?
I think there's two things. First of all, in terms of input into contracts, if you look at the programme for government commitment is to place social clauses in all contracts. As I mentioned to you, the standard forms of contract that we have will allow that to happen. We're involved in providing advice, and we do provide advice into the Department of Education and well, most departments. As part of our role as a COPE, we will be promoting social clauses into contracts. So it's not as if lack of reporting back in terms of overall figures means that there's not activity in there. I suppose what we would like to do in terms of getting the review carried out through SIB and the new regulations coming into play, which are designed to facilitate policy through procurement, that it gives us another chance, if you like, a bit of a, I suppose fresh start is probably a bit strong, but it gives us an opportunity just to focus on how we're going to do this in terms of, you know, the mandate for the next, you know, the next programme for government and what have you.
I mean, except, Chair, that there might be activity going on, but at least it's very hard to evaluate or assess how effective something is if you've only part of the information, even, you know, not only for a committee to scrutinise, but even for you guys in your role of looking at this and saying, well, how effective are we getting what we need, where we need it, are we getting these social clauses in? If the data is, if the returns are problematic getting them in, or some departments aren't cooperating.
Except it's difficult to monitor if you don't have a report. It's not a complete monitoring exercise then, except that.
Thanks, Chair.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your evidence so far. You mentioned earlier on about the issue both of apprenticeships and I suppose the flow through in terms of work placements. It's obviously something that's dealt with in your report. In terms of the issue, and I appreciate some of this strays into the detail of from a Dell point of view, but ensuring that we're getting the number of people on the appropriate level in terms of the work placements. Obviously Dell has there's been a rejigging in terms of what they're providing, and I suppose you've got the closure of the Steps to Work programme that they get identified as being you know, the core of work placement. In terms of, obviously there's going to be part of a process of review of arrangements, we'll just to ask you sort of 2 or 3 points in relation to that. I mean, what's the impact in terms of targets of the closure? And from your understanding in terms of the position on the review of arrangements, I suppose A, what's been put in the interim while those are taking place, what do you see as the timescale then for that review, and therefore something being up and running take the place of from the Steps to Work point?
In terms of the existing contracts, there's clearly an issue then, is there's a contractual commitment to comply with that scheme. That scheme's no longer available. So that produces, from a contract law point of view, a variation on the contract. What we need to do then, almost on a contract-by-contract basis, is to negotiate with the contractor as to how a replacement might be put in place in the contract that is equivalent or produces some social benefit. So that's an exercise that we have to with contract managers.
And that's having to be done, if you like, almost contract by contract, rather than
we would hope to persuade contractors that, you know, they had an obligation in the contract to produce social value through their engagement in the contract, and we should ask them then to come forward with some alternatives. If you were doing this, I mean, if a normal construction practice, if you hit an obstacle, it's usual that you will go to the contractor and say, give me a proposal for getting around the obstacle and give you your costs associated with it. So that's the type of conversation that would normally go on anyway in terms of a contract change.
Just in terms, just to pick up on that, and I appreciate that maybe some of these things are still at the discussion stage. And from the point of view of the employer, at least you're involved with the contract meeting, is that working out reasonably well in terms of those discussions? Are you meeting much resistance, or are there any problems, or is it maybe either too early to say, or maybe just a bit of a patchwork in terms of the response?
I think in terms of, I think it is too early to say, because the closure of the scheme has happened. We've been trying to see if we can come forward with a standard approach to solving that particular issue, and we haven't been able to do it. What we intend to do is to put some scenarios together that will inform the approach taken by contract managers. But in normal contracting operations, it would not be unusual to have some sort of change on the contract that needs the contract manager to discuss that. We will provide advice to those that feel that they, who are managing the contract, don't have that. Going forward, it does seem to me that the feedback we've had is that there is a preference now for a shift towards paid employment rather than training opportunities. And again, we've started to engage in the construction area with the Construction Employers Federation and others through SIFNI into moving back to X pounds of contract value means one paid employment place. And I suppose that produces an easier bit of monitoring if you can identify that an individual has come off a long-term unemployment placement into work placement. That's the way we would intend to move forward.
And just in terms of from the moving forward point, and I appreciate in one sense if officials out of Dell were sitting in front of us, maybe easier to answer. The feedback you're getting, what do you see sort of as the potential timescale for the review of those arrangements that Dell have put in place to come to some level of conclusion?
Well, in terms of what the interim arrangement is moving forward, as Des said, the existing contracts, you have to negotiate those one by one. You don't have any other choice. For anything new that is now being let, we have been talking to the construction industry about an arrangement which would be for every so many pounds of labour value, there would be one person taken off the longer term unemployment register. And we should be going out with guidance on that really in the next few weeks. I mean, we've just been finalising our discussions on it. Then I think in terms of where we go in the longer term, we look to the SIB review to see what comes out of that, and we want to think about the longer term policy in light of that. But the important thing is that for the meantime, we have got something which is providing social benefit and is impacting on the pretty large number of people from the construction sector who went out of work over the last years with the dip in the market, and bringing some of those back into the market who have been employed for some time.
Okay, thank you.
Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Des, Gareth, thanks very much. It's great to see people at the very heart of the Procurement Directorate focused on social clauses, because this is where the rubber hits the road, and you're aware out there that there's some cynicism about our reviews and our analysis and our continuing guidance in this, and not enough delivery. So I'm glad to hear we're up and running with more advice, a new toolbox launched in Titanic Belfast, where I think we created 10 social clause jobs out of an £100 million spend, so appropriate place to be involved in that, and Belfast City Council was at the heart of that because we give £10 million for that project, so the blame starts here. But to break it down very simply, how many contracts have had social clauses in them in the last 2 years, 3 years, and how many people got jobs as a result of those social clauses? Do we have a sort of ballpark figure for those?
Well, I don't know if we have. You've asked for the last number of years. We would need to come back with detail.
But any period at all. I mean, just when is it 10? Is it 1,000 contracts have had social clauses
in terms of the just looking at the construction contracts, we'll have fuller figures for supplies and services after the end of the financial year, but the construction side, looking from November 2013 to September 2014, so just under a year, there were 411 construction contracts awarded, and just at paragraph 7 of the paper that we've supplied, we've set out what would be the work placement weeks and what would be the apprenticeships. For example, 152 contracts have a target for the provision of apprenticeships. So those input kind of figures are there. The issue that we've had, and this was really what led to the thoughts on the SIB review, was that in terms of how many people are getting jobs because of that, we just don't know. Our responsibility within CPD under the Programme for Government has been to make sure that contracts are having social clauses put into them. It is very difficult to link the people who've been on steps to work programmes through to who's in work at the minute. So the SIB review will be looking at what information there is on impact. I rather suspect that there's not an awful lot of information about, but I think if we're in the business of moving from a work placement arrangement through to an actual job arrangement, it becomes much, much easier to show the impact that you're having, because you are directly creating jobs for people who have been longer term unemployed, and that's much easier to see the impact, and it's much easier to monitor.
And I mean, it's wonderful to see this focus on social clauses, and this is we've been around long enough to remember Innes McCormick introducing this and actually pioneering it in the Royal Victoria Hospital. But would you agree that that's the figure that we need to be able to bring out to the public, that there were 1,000 people who came off preferably long-term employment, but 1,000 unemployed people who got work through our contract. Would you agree that that's the figure that we need?
Certainly, I think when you actually hear an individual who's come through on a social clause and actually explain, stand up and tell a room full of people the impact that that's had on their life, I mean, that's a very powerful story to hear. How you actually get that information is, I think, the issue, because we struggle with management systems that allow us to trace individuals through that system.
But will you agree it's vital that we find a way to do that? We need a solution to that, because the public, the public are pleased, I think, Chair, that we are now focused on social clauses. It's the priority issue of our time is providing unemployment to especially areas that have suffered long-term unemployment. But is all the other reviews not going to be a waste of time if we can't say that 4,000, 2,400 people got jobs?
That was really one of the points that the procurement board was making last time we went to them on this in November, which is that there is an obligation across government, across the civil service, to monitor the impacts of policies. We didn't seem to be in a position where we were able to do that in terms of what had happened to date. So it is identified as a priority.
You're trying to get there.
The future.
And then to follow up on that, I suspect that you will share my frustrations. If we went through the Section 75 categories, we clearly don't have figures for how many travellers and other ordinary people who did or didn't benefit from social clauses. And you mentioned young people in care. We have this target of getting 75% of them into education or training or employment. I take it with no figures to tell us how we're doing it at that. We don't have the figures, we don't have a breakdown, I suppose, on the Section 75
we don't
categories.
have a Section 75 breakdown again, but again, I think it's an issue for the future.
Okay. Chair, thank you, Gemma. But I want to repeat, I mean, it gives me great heart to see this issue on the table. You're clearly very professional, working very hard on it, and you can be sure this committee will be pushing behind you to get the answers you want, to get monitored returns back, and so you can really deliver on this pledge of government. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. Leslie?
It's been on the table for a while now, as everyone knows. But turning now to developments elsewhere and maximising social benefit from public procurement, the committee has noted changes in other places, Great Britain and the Republic of Ireland, including legislative changes. What risk is there that by the way we operate and relying solely on administrative means, that our approach is less robust and effective than other jurisdictions?
Well, there was a general decision to be made as to whether you want to take forward a particular policy initiative through administrative means or through legislation. And the executive did make a decision when it agreed the policy way back in 2002 that it was set on pushing things through in terms of administrative action, which is the sort of thing that we've put through in our guidance, the procurement guidance notes. I mentioned to you just a bit earlier on that the legislation that we've seen taken forward in England and Wales and in Scotland has higher threshold levels before it requires an intervention in terms of social clauses. So when you're framing legislation, I suppose you need to be much clearer, I suppose, as to where your particular piece of legislation will start to impact. I mean, guys are probably better at legislation impact than what I would be, but I think the point I want to make as well is that the new directives have clearly come from Europe with a policy intent available in them in terms of social and economic. So the regulations themselves that will come into place in the next wee while will allow for social and economic and environmental measures to come through. But whether the legislation itself carries a sanction, what that sanction is to enforce it, is a different matter.
Yeah, and their legislation in England, for example, as I understand it, there's no sanction attached to it. I mean, personally, I tend to think if you can do something by administrative means, it gives you a more flexible solution, and it is easier to change it in light of changing circumstances than if you have a piece of primary legislation. But I should say that this is one of the specific issues that the SIB study is going to cover, so we'll need to see what recommendation comes from that.
So will the SIB study include, for example, the EU directives that Des has mentioned
It
here?
includes the question of legislation versus administrative action. Yes.
Right. And is that in that particular? You do mention it, I think, in your pack about the environmental aspects of the whole exercise.
Yeah, the
Is that going to be a problem, do you think?
Well, what the EU directives are doing and the new regulations which we're expecting to be laid in Parliament any time now, they make more explicit the fact that you can be thinking about social and environmental concerns. European law has been developing over the last 10 or 15 years on this. So it is now very explicit. It's not quite at this stage saying that it's an expectation, but there is lots of stuff in the recitals of the European directive that is focused on social and environmental concerns. So I think that's something that we can build on in terms of moving forward by emphasising, look, this is now something that is becoming standard across Europe, not just here, and we very much want to be in line with and indeed ahead of the trend on it.
Okay, okay.
Okay, members, moving on to the next session, and before we do, can I seek agreement to note and to forward the CEF corresponds to DFP for response to the issues highlighted? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, next set of questions. Michaela?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the human rights issues, what are the most vulnerable sectors of public procurement in terms of the risks of human rights breaches? And what measures are in place to check and verify the human rights records of contractors or suppliers, both at the selection and contract implementation stages?
The two particular areas that have been highlighted here, and as you know, the Human Rights Commission has produced a report on human rights and procurement, and I'll come to the discussions that we've been having with them about the way forward. But two particular areas where there would be a risk. One would be in the provision of personal services. So, for example, social care services, where you have carers going into people's homes, or where you have people moving into residential care. That's obviously an area where human rights considerations are seen as having a particular importance and impact. The other area, and this is maybe where we get into more difficulty, but the other area is where there is a supply chain. So uniforms are being bought from a local supplier but are being manufactured in the Far East. And what can you do to make sure that human rights standards are being observed down the supply chain? And that you're not going to have, as has happened, a factory that collapses or something else that happens because those standards haven't been observed internationally. Now, that is a more difficult one on which you probably have to rely more on people's assurances that these matters are being given consideration. We can't always be sending inspectors out to the Far East to look at what's happening there. So those are the kind of areas where this is a particular issue. In terms of the measures that are in place, I know there is certainly an awareness of those who are across the system. We're not talking just about CPD, but we're talking about the Centres of Procurement Expertise. There is certainly an awareness of the importance of human rights issues, and I think the Human Rights Commission's report has helped that. What we're proposing with the Commission to do is to identify a pilot project where we could look kind of from start to finish at the human rights aspects. So you'd be looking at how best you can specify at the commissioning stage that you want to focus on human rights. You're looking at how you evaluate that during the procurement process, and you're looking then at how you monitor it at the contract management stage. So we're just in discussions with the Commission about a suitable pilot there. We'll be talking to the COPs about that as well. And I think that would give us some useful learning about how you target this and how you really apply it in practice. Say it's not that people are unaware of this, but I think as the Commission has identified, there are maybe better structures that we can put in place where there's a risk that there might be human rights issues in a particular contract.
We have undertaken to look at our documentation to make sure that we flag up more clearly the fact that human rights obligations that are with department are transferred across to contractors when they take a contract on. And we would look to do a bit of work around being clear about the type of obligation and the type of contractor that we want to carry forward those particular areas that are at risk. So that's a bit of work that we've committed to do. Human rights folk, we'll be happy to share detail of that once we have that.
Absolutely. You talk about the pilot project. You do say that it's something that's only in kind of discussions at the minute around a pilot project. So have you a specific time frame for that? Is that something that's...
The new regulations that are coming through put in place the overall European directives, and the European directives are quite clearly now a policy instrument, and they allow us to consider the whole life cost of or operation of a particular service or whatever else we're bringing in, and it goes beyond just it also allows us to look at the process that might be involved. So these are things that were not clearly allowed for or brought up front in terms of, so we can start to look at not only the service that's been provided, but the processes that might be used to provide that service. And I think that's where we need to get the experts who have, in terms of procurement in specific sectors that are more aligned to the type of thing that Gareth had mentioned, involved in looking at what the human rights aspects might be in terms of social care or education care or whatever that might be, as well as a general view of how contractors need to carry this obligation forward.
And just on the potential options for strengthening human right protections and public procurement around guidance and legislation, what potential options are there for strengthening that?
Well, I do think we need to look at how clearly we make sure that contractors realise that human rights obligations are being passed to them and what that means for them. And I think we've seen some statements around what that means for a contractor and the type of contractor that has to be there to fulfill that. And there's a sort of growing feeling now that contractors have a duty of care, not only to deliver the thing that they're obliged to in a contracting sense, but also how they produce a duty of care to the taxpayer, a duty of care to communities that are impacted by their works. I think those are the sorts of things that we need to look at, if you like, for the next lift in terms of what public procurement can help achieve.
But we're certainly open to producing formal guidance, and my particular concern would be that is kind of focused on the areas where there is greatest risk, so that we can take a proportionate approach.
Right, one more, Chair, please. I recently attended a meeting in my own area where it was a public meeting for post-19 people with learning difficulties. And I know Dell are doing a review at the minute around the post-19. There's a very vocal post-19 lobby group, as you would be aware. But what equal opportunities will there be in terms of social clauses and that for contractors and individuals to employ people with learning difficulties? Has that been a factor?
There is provision in the existing regulations in terms of reserve contracts where 50% of the employees within a particular firm are disabled. The new regulations talk about not only the issue of disabled but also disadvantaged persons. But the the threshold of 50% has dropped down to 30. So there is intent within the directives and the regulations to allow for that type of activity or contracts to be reserved for those types of organisations that will have to then employ, to meet the regulations purely, 30% disabled or disadvantaged. Now, the issue here is that while there is a definition for disabled, there's no definition currently of what disadvantage might be. And that produces a large set of uncertainty. But
is that something that will be worked on?
The Cabinet Office is looking to produce some guidance on that, so we're waiting to see what they come out with that we'll be able to circulate. But it is another area where I think it illustrates the importance of the commissioning phase, because within CPD we're not necessarily best placed to know that there are opportunities there in terms of providing help to people with learning difficulties. The people who are best placed are those who are at the front end of the commissioning stage within departments, and again, that's why we want to bring more attention to that stage and to the kind of commercial and other skills that are needed at that stage, that people can be thinking about how do we bring these collateral advantages
so
to
that would
public
have the
procurement.
impact on the ground, so that would be a critical stage where, it should be.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michaela.
Thank you, Chair.
Des, in terms of the ISNI delivery portal, there's been a lot of criticism, especially from the Construction Employers Federation. We've met with them on a number of occasions where they've raised it. Their most recent correspondence on the 30th of January can make reference to the fact that to date the portal has failed to be of any particular use to the construction industry and planning ahead. And the points that they have raised are concerning. And I hope that they have been addressed. For example, it says the current report provides no way for assembly committees or the construction industry to monitor project slippage, and they suggest that this level of information could be provided online. They also suggest that each future project should have a status attached to it and like a traffic light system in terms of monitoring, and also in terms of contract value bands. But they also say that the lot of information on the portal has been actually out of date and of no use to themselves at all. So in terms of what yourselves are doing now in regard to the new guidance, does that cover all those points?
Yeah, the guidance we produced is really at the final stages of approval. We've consulted with the construction industry and with the COPs and with the departments on that, and the guidance note is now in its final wash through with the COPs who will be responsible for putting the information in place. The actual management of the system is an SIB tool, and SIB, as I understand it, produced a resource that will specifically help departments and COPs understand how the system operates and deal with any wrinkles there might be in the operation of the system. But that guidance note is ready for approval by the Procurement Board.
Yes, it is just at the very last stage. And then in terms of the reporting issues which you highlighted, Chair, the SIB is now producing a range of reports which go to MLAs and to ministers and to others, so that you can see just where exactly things are at that are in the procurement pipeline.
So are the CEF happy with the guidance? And also in terms of the guidance, I mean, just because you publish guidance doesn't mean it's going to deliver what you seek to deliver. How can we be assured that the changes that the sector and the industry are looking for in terms of transparency, in terms of up-to-date information, how can we be assured that will change?
We've agreed to have a standing item on the Construction Industry Forum agenda that will look at how that system is operated. But in behind that is also this issue of around departments declaring a procurement pipeline. So we've also committed to meet with the construction industry to look at what the forward work programme might be. So there are a number of things that we've committed to do that will flag up to, certainly CEF will, certainly others in the construction industry will have the opportunity to make their criticisms directly to CPD, because we'll be organising the particular meetings. And I have no doubt if the system is not impacted by this guidance note, that they will be raising it as they have done previously. So
So in terms of these problems, do you
we anticipate that
believe they'll be ironed out within the next 6 months? Or
if the guidance, well, we'll certainly get an indication at the next SIFNI meeting or early summer that we'll see whether there's been any impact at all in the guidance note being issued and the quality of the material that's on the system. We will be monitoring that.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been a lot of contact directly between the SIB and the COPES, on particular issues, and even down to the stage of technical issues and how you format the spreadsheets to get the information onto the database. So all of that has been about improving the quality of the information that's going on. That's all been happening in the background in the run-up to issuing the guidance note.
okay, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I want to touch on two aspects. First of all, on the basis of, given the fact we're under greater levels of financial constraint, just wonder what's your assessment in terms of the risks or dangers that departments will move towards, much more towards lower price, simply as the basis for awarding contracts, rather than looking at the best overall sort of economic tender, and if you like, therefore trying to almost save short-term money side of it. And I suppose I'll come to a different point in a minute or two, but in terms of the guidance that's there in terms of the EU threshold about lowest price in terms of the definition, there's a limitation regarding very simple and straightforward contracts. What's your take in terms of any definition of that?
Yeah, I mean, we did operate on a very clear position that lowest price generally can result in not delivering the quality of output that you want. And particularly in construction, there's study after study that suggests that simply picking up the lowest price will mean that the next price will be lower and then lower, and before you know it, you're in the sub-economic, which means you can't actually achieve. There's a famous saying about spending a little money and losing money and whatever. I can't remember the exact detail of that. But the principle in terms of construction, that unless it's very simple, a simple thing might be a simple storage building with no great office accommodation or M&E works and mechanical electrical works inside it. You could say that looks like quite a simple thing. You could price on that basis. But in terms of the best value for money, going back to that again, is a combination of price, quality, and sustainability. Albeit that we've got to make sure that in trying to arrive at the best assessment of that we don't load up the industry with lots of submissions that turn into essay writing out competitions. So the lowest price should be by exception, or where there is a very simple product or whatever to purchase.
I mean, as part of that, do you think, I suppose on a slightly different aspect of that, government always needs to be reasonably acutely aware of the broader economic context of whatever they're signing up to, rather than almost just a headline figure. I know, although that became a moot point, I know experience myself locally on a particular issue where there was a number of competitors. A local council was selling on, which would have gone to various different sort of potential activities. And to some extent, the problem, at least at one stage, was that the advice was being given from a finance point of view that it would be very difficult to step outside whoever was putting the highest price simply on the table, despite the fact that maybe, say, one of the offers, which would be a bit less than that, but a longer term generating up, even from the point of view of the council, would have generated up a lot more rates for the council, and over a lifetime period would have brought in a good deal more money. The issue certainly became moot in that regard, but you got a situation where, because there was at times then a certain level of constraint, it meant that, if you like, in that case local government, but because of central government nations, we have a situation in which sometimes things can be skewed because they're not looking at the full picture on that side of it. But that may be more of a comment than I suppose a question. Just in terms of another aspect, on the issue of project bank accounts, I suppose first of all, obviously one of the main purposes was to try and particularly help with cash flow, but particularly the idea of to try to reduce the level of late payments going to subcontractors. Sort of device. I appreciate it's early days for that. I mean, is there any emerging evidence of that having an impact, first of all, on that aspect of things?
Well, certainly we looked at the last Construction Industry Forum, we did give feedback on the pilot projects that CPD are operating. The feedback generally is it takes a little time for folk to understand how you set them up, and but that's just a sort of learning exercise. But once they're in place, actually, it was quite good feedback from contractors that that actually helped their business process. No real detraction from the concept that firms should pay promptly if they're being paid. I think that what industry repeatedly says that a government can create a level playing field and to push forward to have that applied consistently, then contractors will work on that basis, and we can flush out then those contractors who are not best practice contractors.
Just suppose two aspects that arise now. That apart from the PBAs themselves, I mean, any other thoughts in terms of additional measures that could be taken to advance, if you like, the situation as regards the issue of late payments?
We already have the situation of back-to-back subcontracts. We have guidance that subcontracting should not go ahead unless it's approved by the contracting authority or the client, and that the conditions of contract that are applied to the main contractor should be similar conditions of contract applied to the subcontract. So contractually, there's a commitment from the main contractor to the subcontractor. We also have, as you know, the Construction Act in Northern Ireland, which allows for a way of resolving disputes. So we have a number of things in place. I think none of it goes, my view, beyond the project manager. The best bit of this is the project manager being interested.
Yeah, I mean, as often the case is actually the crucial element.
It's maybe worth mentioning that just under the Fair Payment Charter, there has been a percentage validation to make sure that payments from contractors to subcontractors are happening promptly, and we've validated over the last 6 months or so, probably around about 15% of payments. There's only been one irregularity that's been identified that's being chased up, so we're certainly seeing a fair degree of compliance, which is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the informal feedback that I get from representative of the industry is that when CPD's systems are applied, that the contractors are getting their...
I mean, it seems a reasonable bit of empirical evidence on that basis, but obviously, as you indicated, in terms of the project bank accounts, it's obviously the pilot projects that are using these I suppose the issue in that, in terms of any pilot situation, is to what extent then you're able to evaluate to roll out across the board. Do you have any information in terms of when you feel we'll be in a position to do a sort of a formal review of the projects and a sort of time scale for that? Therefore, hopefully that gets then sort of a clean bill of health can then be used in a wider context in that regard and rolled out.
Yeah, in terms of the pilots, I think we were committed to do them after a 12-month period to see how they would operate. But there are other organisations, Highways Authority, for example, that have pushed along on those. So we do have the opportunity to look at the policy through the Cabinet Office has been to put quite a substantial value through on project bank accounts. So we have an opportunity to look at those examples now. Typically, their numbers will, in terms of contract value, will be much in excess of where we are.
Yeah, but still potential lessons.
But still
if people are ahead of the game in us because they've moved at an earlier stage in terms of the
it goes back again to community benefit. If we've got subcontractors who are being paid and they're paying their employees, that drips out into the community. So there is that imperative to try and ensure that the supply chain operates effectively, because at the end of the day, you get better performance if people are being paid or committed to the project.
John?
Thanks, Chair. So over some of the, obviously, the new regulations, and they were in line with some of this committee's report a number of years ago. For SMEs and social enterprise, to what extent do you see those been binding on public procurement? Actually, how would you enforce them?
Well, there's an obligation now under the new regulations that will require an assessment of contracts as to whether they're suitable to be broken into lots. And the option then will be to restrict the number of lots that can be won by any particular contractor. So there's an opportunity to produce contracting at lower values, and one of the big strengths in the past in terms of SMEs accessing public procurement opportunities was simply the value of the contracts. So if the contracts are in smaller values, hopefully there's more in that. There are requirements as well in terms of the number of the value of turnover that a particular SME might have, and that's now limited under the new regulations to twice the contract value, which again should prevent an inadvertent barrier being put in place if someone wants to make sure that a particular contract is going to be fulfilled, but with a contractor who has a good track record and good finances. You might inadvertently suggest a turnover level that is going to remove quite a raft of SMEs from actually participating. So there are things around that. The other issue that comes up is around the levels of insurance that contractors have to hold, and we've got some guidance out on that. But one of the thrusts in the review of public procurement legislation right across Europe was the impact of SMEs and the fact that economic growth across Europe is going to come in large measure from SMEs, and that the spending that comes through in public procurement has to be an open opportunity for SMEs. So there is quite a focus in the review of public procurement and the legislation that's coming forward on making that happen.
Chair, you're quite a bit in getting this, your regulations worked up, and actually then that gives you a problem or an obligation about communicating that out. Have you any?
Well, we monitor the success. We monitor the take-up of public procurement opportunities, and we monitor the success of opportunities to SMEs and right down to micro, and that's reported each month in the economic bulletin. So you will see in there the number of the contracts, the value of contracts awarded, and the amount, the percentage that's gone to SMEs and the percentage that's gone to local firms. We get a report on CPD on a monthly basis in terms of how that breaks down as part of our monitoring of. I think we probably need to do a bit more on terms of broadcasting that success rate that there is, for SME.
Maybe just worth mentioning that alongside the directives and the new regulations, and there are important guarantees for SMEs there, but the new e-tenders system, which we're looking to roll out from April, the replacement for e-sourcing. That will make things easier for firms. You'll only need to sign up a lot of your basic details once. You'll kind of register those, keep them up to date. You won't have to enter all the same information every time you bid, particularly around some of the pre-qualification questionnaires. A lot of those will be standard and in the system where you just keep them up to date. They will be automatically downloaded every time you bid. So there's kind of straightforward administrative stuff there that I think will help smaller businesses. The other bit is that we continue to work very closely with Intertrade Ireland around running Meet the Buyer events every year. We had one in the Ramada in the autumn when we had maybe 600 firms coming along to meet government buyers, and we participate in the events in the south as well. So those are quite important in terms of being able to demonstrate practically to small businesses that government is open to small business, even to the level of having the computer system, the e-sourcing system set up, and we sit down with people and talk them through, here's what you need to do, here's the important stuff when you're looking to tender for government work.
I think just finally is around Lord Young's proposals for, well, the rest of the UK and not including Northern Ireland. Is there anything that's being pushed in England and Wales, particularly that either we are doing already or that we're not but should be?
We did look very carefully at Lord Young's proposals and looked at what we've been doing in terms of following on from the report that was produced by the committee and the activities that we've been putting in place to deal with the recommendations of the committee. We're actually pushing this along a little bit further ahead of what the Lord Young proposals would be. So we've been able to, I suppose, in discussion with the Cabinet Office, to convince them that we already have a number of those issues embedded in guidance notes and what have you in Northern Ireland, and they didn't need to be applied here. But, we'll continue to watch the developments of the new regulations as they're rolled out. And we are in constant contact or regular contact with Cabinet Office and with others in Wales and Scotland. In fact, we had some people across in Scotland last Friday. So we're in a network of people who are trying to develop various bits and pieces of procurement activity, to meet their particular location. And we've always been trying to pick the best bit from wherever it is, try and make sure it fits back into Northern Ireland, and try and take advantage of that as quickly as we can. So we will continue to watch whether the Lord Young proposals start to move, the folk in England and Wales ahead of us, and we'll bring forward proposals here if we have to.
Thanks, Chair.
Leslie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Glad to hear that the subcontractor protection's working. It was a major issue when I was on the Enterprise Committee, and indeed many subcontractors were forced to the wall through late payments and indeed some cases non-payment. Yeah. But if we could take you back to the e-tender situation, when officials were with us last May, I think it was, they told us this would all be ready and operational by January. What is the reason for that slippage, and what effect does that have on the costs, if any?
The issue that arose was that we've been trying to make the system, the ultimate aim of this system is that it will be a single portal for the whole of Northern Ireland. Any public funded or largely public funded projects can be put on it. To do that, we've had to deal with a number of, obviously the COPs, and also a number of users that are not that are in councils and what have you. We had a particular requirement from one of the COPs to produce a piece of software into the overall system that we were procuring. Having looked at their request, we felt it would be useful just to delay the thing by a few months, allow for that piece of software to be integrated to the system. So that's where it's.
So that wasn't anticipated then last May?
No, it wasn't, because we had quite a detailed, to do this thing, we had quite a detailed schedule of requirements that were in place. But this requirement did come a bit left field, I suppose, would be fair to describe it. But I think it's better to have the system with full support of all those who operate on it, rather than trying to put it in place and then tweak it, for a particular aspect later on. That was the advice that we had.
Okay. Well, the aim now, I must say I agree with this, we would have one location for all Northern Ireland public sector opportunities. What sanctions are indeed maybe incentives would you need to make sure that, you did mention local authorities are, for example, that they become part of that and non-indeed part of that public body?
Well, we're providing the system free of use, so that the system, the way we set up the licensing arrangements on it, that bodies can come on board. Gareth will keep me right, he's the SRO on it. But what we've also been looking at is at the configuration of the new councils. When we've actually looked at that, a number of councils have been working on the old e-tender system. But oddly enough, when they've been combined in the new system, we find at least one of the partners in the new councils will have already been on the e-tender system. So we're hoping it'll be an easier transition for the new councils to move entirely onto the new e-tender system.
And if they don't, what?
Well, we will continue to encourage them, because I think the new system has additional functionality that will make it easier to run procurement competitions and give them management information back. And we're in obviously a situation where budgets are going to be constrained, so the less resource we spend on putting stuff in envelopes and pushing them around the system or managing a separate system, I think that the imperative will be, here's a system that works, here's a number of different bodies that are able to use it and are saying it works okay. That's the case there, is by example and by persuasion.
What lessons have you learned then from the e-sourcing system sort of currently there and have been applied then to the new?
Well, the e-sourcing system was primarily a system that was there to, if you like, record the transactional bit that was the procurement process, issue tenders, receipt, issue confirmation letters or clarification letters. The system that we've got coming forward will give us better management information. And one of the criticisms that we've had is that we don't hold sufficient management information that allows us to make strategic decisions going forward. So this will be, and also we've made improvements in terms of the user interface, not only from the procurement people who will be using it, but also we think from the suppliers who have to interact with the system.
And there's the ability for suppliers to sign up to receive notifications in particular categories, so you can specify which categories you're interested in. And so obviously the more public bodies we can get using the system, the more, just by signing up for that, you'll get a much more comprehensive picture as a supplier of what opportunities are out there across the public sector.
And you'll be able to monitor this much better than the previous system, which really was, I guess, a by default system.
We're developing internally a business information system that will sit on top and will draw information out and help our management monitoring. Yes, indeed.
Okay, thanks.
Adrian?
So, Chairman, can I ask you a wee bit about the pre-qualification criteria? You know, what specific steps has CPD taken to ensure that pre-qualification marking criteria, which they use, doesn't favour incompetent contractors or previous contractors who have held contracts before?
Yeah, I think that the issue here, I suppose, is that in drawing up a procurement competition, we're not allowed to favour or hinder any supplier. So we can't create a situation where we decide that an incumbent supplier has a commercial advantage and therefore we'll level the playing field by doing something that supports the non-incumbent. Right? So that has to be a level playing field. We have to make sure that we don't put barriers in by requiring a fresh entrant to the market by saying you must have had 10 years of experience doing whatever. So we can use general experience and we can take on board private sector experience. So you wouldn't, for example, in a social housing area, you wouldn't say we want to restrict this only to contractors who've been involved in a framework for social housing, when you have contractors who've been involved in private sector housing and commercial development. So it's that type of thing that you must make sure when you draw up the criteria that it's a level playing field and that you do not introduce barriers to effective competition. We have seen examples where incumbents do not always win the competition because the new entrant may have a better idea of doing things.
We've also, just at a practical level, where we're looking for experience, and as Des says, looking for broader experience, but we're looking for that experience, extending that period from 5 years to 7 years, I think, so that there's more opportunity for people to demonstrate maybe work they were doing just before the economy reached the problems that it has had in recent times.
Yeah. Well, how confident are you now that the pre-qualification criteria are being applied by COPs or contract authorities don't act as a barrier to increase the number of SMEs accessing public contracts? It's something we hear fairly often, in our constituencies and in this committee. Yeah. They just can't get their foot on the ladder at all.
In terms of the two COPs that operate under CPD, clearly I've had an instruction into those areas that we're not used to. When it moves out into another COP, I'm not sure I can comment unless I have the specifics of a particular problem. Mm-hmm. And we have agreed that if a contractor was to raise an issue, CPD, that we would then pass it on to COPs to have them look at it. COPs should have a complaints procedure that allows for an independent review of what they've been doing in the procurement process. We have one in CPD, so we're happy to take concerns directly that way, but we don't have a role to say to COP, you must do it this way.
The role there for CPD at all?
Well, all we do is we monitor overall the number of contracts that are going to SMEs, and that's continuing to be, touching 80% really across construction supplies and services when you total it all up. So we certainly on a monthly basis monitor those figures and we publish them, but at least as a way of, if things were starting to go badly wrong, you would see it reflected.
And you get your figures every month.
Yeah.
Fair enough, Chair, thanks.
Thanks, Adrian. Just to go back to the e-tenders facility again, I mean, obviously that could potentially address a lot of the issues that the committee had and committee had in its procurement inquiry. Is there any way the committee could get involved in raising awareness of that in the months ahead?
Yeah, well, we have been considering how we actually start to communicate that this new system will be in place. Obviously, it's going to have an impact on those who are registered on the existing system. And how do we, for a short time, we're going to have to operate two systems because contracts will be brought through on the existing system at the same time we're setting up and bringing across bodies onto that. So if the committee could do anything to help us, we'd certainly welcome that help. If you had anything in mind, we'd take it away with us to look at that.
Yeah, members of the committee could certainly, as an initial point, sort of raise awareness of it with businesses and their constituency and so on and so forth.
Maybe we could produce a short briefing for MLS then, just on the system and how it operates, what guidance there might be available, what to do if people get into an issue or problem. If that would be useful, we'd certainly look at producing something on that, short note, information note on it.
Okay, members? Yes, Gareth, thank you both very much. Okay, members, can I seek agreement to schedule an oral briefing on the SIB review on the implementation of social clauses? And seek agreement to commission research seeking an update on how the North compares to other jurisdictions and maximising social and community benefits from public procurement. Agreed? Agreed. Moving on then to public service, civil servants and others pensions regs 2015, pages 87 to 103 of your packs. Laid in the Business Office by DFP and is subject to affirmative resolution. Before members at the meeting on the 21st of January, when it was briefed by officials on the initial proposal, rule was laid before the Assembly on the 23rd, subject to affirmative resolution. However, the examiner's statutory rules informed the Department on Monday the 26th that as the rule purports to have been made subject to affirmative resolution, it will have no effect since it should have been laid in draft before making. The Department subsequently replaced the rule accordingly. So can I refer members to the examiner's report, which covers the SR at page 153 of the table pack. And the examiners confirmed he has raised no points about the rule by way of technical scrutiny. So if members are content, I'll put the question. The committee has considered SR 2015-15, the Public Service, Civil Service and others. Pensions Consequential Amendment Regs, NI 2015, recommends it be affirmed by the Assembly. Agreed? Public Service, Civil Service and others, Pensions Regs, NI 2015, pages 32 to 152. Laid in the Business Office, subject to negative resolution. At the meeting on the 19th of November, committee was briefed by officials on proposal for subordinate legislation. Members were content with the proposal, which provides for the move to career average revalued earnings or care schemes. DFP has confirmed there has been no policy changes since the committee noted the proposal. It's been laid in the Business Office by DFP for formal consideration by the committee and subject to negative resolution. The examiner has confirmed he has raised no points about the rule by way of technical scrutiny. So members are content. I'll put the question. The committee has considered SR 2014-290, the Public Service, Civil Servants and Others Pensions Regulations, NI 2015, has no objection to the rule. Agreed? Agreed. SR 2015-20, the rates making and levying of different rates regs, NI 2015, pages 105 to 111. Laid in Business Office for formal consideration, subject to negative resolution. At the meeting on the 14th of January, committee was briefed by officials. Members were content with the proposal. Department confirmed there has been no policy changes since. Rule was laid before the Assembly on the 27th of January and subject to negative resolution. The examiner's report is at page 153 of table papers. Examiner observed that the 21-day rule has been breached, but has confirmed that the explanation offered by the DAP is reasonable and has no points to raise by way of technical scrutiny. So members are content. I'll put the question that the committee has considered SR 2015-20, the rates making and levelling of different rates regs, NI 2015, and has no objection to the rule. Agreed? Correspondence.
Correspondence, Chair, just pick out a couple of items. Page 114, a letter from the Ministers, essentially the Department's response to the Committee's report on flexible working inquiry. It's, I suppose, for noting at the moment in advance of there will be an oral briefing from departmental officials on the response in due course, Chair. Then also there's page 118, there's a response from the Department to correspondence that had been raised by the Men's Aid Association in relation to an aspect of family law reform around parental access to children in cases of divorce and separation. And there is a research paper on this issue next week, and there's also a departmental briefing to the committee on a public consultation that's running on the issue in the coming weeks. So it's, I suppose, for noting in the meantime, ahead of those, but also whether the committee wish to copy this to the original correspondent, just for information, Chair.
Agreed.
And then most of the other items are for noting. There's a page 172. There's correspondence from the ETI committee. It's in relation to inquiry into economic growth and job creation. It's for noting, but also if the committee agrees to send a copy of to seek a copy of any of the department's comments in order to inform this committee's response, because that committee's asking for a response from this committee as well as the department. So members are content to do that. And then there's also it's just an article that research identified on the Barnett formula at page 191, Chair. It's the SIPFA chief executive of SIPFA he takes a different view on the future operation of the Barnett formula than maybe some of the views expressed to date by the expert witnesses. So I just wanted to check if the committee wanted us to explore the possibility of evidence even through a written submission from that to inform the review, Chair.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's the correspondence at page 25. I think maybe that's covered already from the Construction Employers Federation. It's just a forward to DFP for a response. It may also need to be sent to SIB because it has primary responsibility in relation to the ISNI delivery portal. Sure. That's all the correspondence.
Okay, draft work group programme pages 214 to 218 on your panics. I remind members that it was agreed in principle to accept an invitation to visit Leinster House for an informal meeting discussing areas of mutual interest with the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Finance, Public Expenditure and Reform. It's been difficult to find a mutually convenient date, but it's now likely to be sometime in April or May. Members content to proceed on that basis?
If there's just the one Parliament, it would be easier.
I hope you.
If that's a subtle bid to rejoin the union, I don't have to.
Any other business?
Chair, just one wee point.
Economy.
We had the presentation there on the budget, and there's a lot of discussion about these backup schedules. I think it would be very helpful if we had those schedules in advance. It might be interesting to ask them if they could have schedules, not just at time in the future, because a lot of that time he was reading off sheets which we could have easily read off as well, and it was a little bit more complete than what we normally get.
Members content to formalise that and to write to the department?
Yep.
Great. Okay, next meeting will be Wednesday 11th, 10 AM.